So I think one of the biggest sort of goals of the new curriculum is how can we, in a better, more efficient way, really teach these skills to our students. And I think a lot of people previously thought that the way we were doing things wasn't really preparing our students enough. So that they were too focused on the facts and the separate different subjects. So that's why, what can we do about this? How can we more support their ability to learn these skills? So, and then there's Bloom's taxonomy, which I usually show at this point. I think it's a classic theory about the different levels of sort of learning. And it has to do with the new curriculum as well, because remembering, especially, is sort of
questioning techniques are basically used. The questions are made for the papers, for the testing, through the Bloom's taxonomy. Are you all using that in your curriculum, in your way of assessing the children?
This taxonomy. It's not something that we're sort of supposed to use, or it's not in the curriculum. It's not something we're supposed to use.
Are you integrating it with the questioning techniques?
Well, I think so, yes. And I actually have a couple of examples that sort of we are trying to sort of consider the different levels.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is that sort of why do things a bit differently. I'm going to show you how differently in a while. But the idea is that we shouldn't focus too much on remembering, because that has to do with sort of facts that anyone can check at any time. There's a lot of information available. We have our phones and we have our computers and so on. And the sort of the higher levels would be like of more use, maybe in real life and in working life and so on. And that's not to say that the traditional approach doesn't also sort of use the different levels, but could we create something? Could we actually apply what we teach in a more sort of real life setting way? So yeah, this is my example. This is from the matriculation examination, just 2 questions. So this doesn't have, we're not in the phenomenon-based thing yet, so this doesn't have anything to do with that, but just to give you an idea that for a long time already in Finland, it's sort of the way we test our students at the general upper secondary level. It's not about remembering small, tiny details and facts. So it's been like this for quite a long time. And as you can see, these questions like, well, the first one is an ethics question. It's like an essay question. So, working life, it's bound to change. It's going to be different. Evaluate how this development will influence employees' ways of constructing their identities in the future. A difficult question, I would say, but it requires the ability to understand like different theories of identity and so on. You need to be able to apply
higher order thinking.
Yeah, higher order thinking, absolutely. And there's even the word evaluate, at least the way I translate it. So, and applying, I'm sure as well. So these different levels, these higher levels are present, being present. I would say in the high school level or the upper secondary level, maybe not so much with the smaller kids. Or a psychology question where you have to evaluate the age limits of like social media services or apps. That's also a very difficult question. You need to apply all kinds of theories about developmental psychology and so on. So we don't have like multiple choice questions in our matriculation examination, unless it's like a foreign language where you have to pick the right preposition or the right inflection of a verb. That's of course very difficult. Main idea is this. Okay, so just a couple of questions. Even though we sort of take into account those higher levels, I have two questions. It's still a pretty academic context. Like it's not like you can take this these are very important questions, and you might be able to apply these questions, I guess. You may need to answer those questions in your work or your life, but it's still pretty theoretical. It's still writing, answering questions based on theory. So then the other question is, how will this prepare our students for things like entrepreneurship, which is a big deal in the curriculum as well. You're supposed to be an active citizen and start your own business and do all kinds of things. And not just the working life is changing. So it's
innovative, becoming more innovative.
Yeah. Yes. And international work as well. So I'm sure that I like these sort of questions, and I'm sure there's a lot of benefits to them. But should we add something? Is there something missing? I guess maybe something to balance this theoretical and academic approach. So that's my actual topic. So this is the traditional, what I call a subject-based approach. So you have all of these subjects. And you have your class, you have your history class, you have your chemistry class, and your mathematics class, and so on. And each one has a separate teacher, and then you'll write your essays and take an exam and learn the facts and maybe understand the theories, and then maybe apply them in an academic context like the one you just saw. And that's all good. But the idea of the phenomenon-based approach would be sort of this. So instead of, or at least in addition to, I think, the subject-based approach, we have a real-world phenomenon, some kind of central idea, something from the real world, not a theory and not something that fits into just one specific subject. I have some examples soon. And then the subjects, of course, are all related to that. So if I have a phenomenon, of course, I'm going to be able to approach it through maybe, biology, physics, the English language, and so on. And on the left-hand side, in the previous slide, I had just, a student or a pupil sitting at their desk, and they're listening, and they're writing down notes, and they're reading their material, writing those essays, and so on. But it's sort of like everybody's working quite often by themselves and sort of for themselves. It's all like a group of individual students. So on the phenomenon-based approach, you have a group, and it's a social context. And that's not to say you can't do group assignments in a specific subject. But if you do the phenomenon-based thing, you sort of almost have to do it this way, and it might be more. There's actually more to do, not just talk and write down things. So this sort of emulates what I just showed you from the curriculum, sort of you have to be able to be in contact with other people. And some of those people are going to be, they're not going to be very nice, or they're not going to be as efficient as you are, and they might be a bit difficult to work with. They might have all these roles that they might try to take. Somebody will just sit there and try not to, do anything and so on. But that's how life is. And that's an amazing skill to learn. Like, how do I cope with these people who will try to dominate the whole group, or who will be passive and not do anything? That's an amazing experience to sort of have to try to figure out a way to make it work. Of course, they have to learn about the subjects as well. They're not just here to learn social skills. That's the challenge. They sort of need to do both. But like the criticism towards the traditional approach is this: if our students, they're great academically, but are they prepared when sort of they face this when they move on? Okay, so phenomenon-based learning enables an emphasis on these things. Learning by doing, social skills, communication, teamwork, like these have to do with what they're doing. And then this has to do with how they're evaluated. And then sort of how it's all organized. Cooperation between the teachers, connecting the subjects, technology, going out into the real world. So there's a lot of different types of, I guess I could group these in a different way. I think there's a couple of different types of things here. Of course, that's not to say you can't use technology while you're learning in the traditional way, but if you have an assignment where you need to actually produce something for the real world, I would say that's an interesting and then sort of useful way to use technology instead of just using it for the sake of using it. Okay, so maybe a bit more concrete level here. So organizing it, and this is just like the basic frame, I would say. And this is something I would encourage you to ask tomorrow when you go to designer school, because they can show you the recent examples maybe and walk you through that. Last autumn they did this big project, I know. Yes. So pick any phenomenon of interest, and I've thrown things there like the moon, rainbow, soap, Vietnam War, or Instagram. So it could be anything. It could be a very concrete, like an object, or it could be an event like the war, or it could be like a social media service. These are all, I guess, the whole thing depends a lot on who you're working with. If you have small kids, I'm sure like the rainbows might be a fun phenomenon to sort of try to understand from a physics point of view, and maybe from like a poet's or a painter's point of view, and so on. Yes. So then you form a team of teachers and you plan a period. And the way I've been doing it, or I've experimented, I would say anything from 1 day to 1 month would be something you can make work. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are some schools that try to sort of do only this, but I'm going to get back to this. But I wouldn't just pick any single method, to use all the time. So I think this is like the best to do in a bit of a shorter period. So you have a motivation. Okay, why Instagram? Why like Vietnam War or some other conflict? Why is it of interest? Why is it important? So I think this is also something that we've discussed or mentioned, like shared leadership. I think this differs quite a lot in different schools. So that some schools you might just have like, okay, you have to do a week of something phenomenon based, and then it's sort of a bit forced. Maybe okay, we have to come up with something. And I think the better idea would be to really just, okay, this is interesting, this is important. Can we use this in our teaching? And then come to this. So you have an actual need to understand that phenomenon. Yes. Okay, so more concrete elements of this, a number of assignments that connect different subjects. So the way I've been doing this, it almost always connects different subjects. I guess you could just, do this inside a single subject, but all my examples sort of, they have to do with the different subjects. And something you also, I think you should think about is both what kinds of skills those assignments and activities will train, both related to those subjects, like Finnish, okay, we need to learn this and this about writing, history, we need to learn these and these concepts, biology, we need to learn these theories or facts. Because if you don't do this work, of course, it's gonna be more like something different, fun, but you might not actually achieve those results you want to achieve. And then also those general skills. So these are those key skills that I showed you. So if you want them to be, become better collaborating and like creative people, you need to sort of include that in your planning as well. So it's not just, okay, form a group and do this. You need to think about what they're gonna learn. And for example, evaluation. If you want to evaluate in a more varied manner, not just those writing skills or facts, you need to sort of build some platform for that. So maybe drama or like a debate could be something that they would do, so that those students who shine when they do that, they'll have that chance to shine. So it's all included there. Why else do this if you're not going to include those different types of learners there as well? Okay, this organization is very important. So it's not just you have a week, here's your assignment, do this. I think it depends on like who you're working with again. So if it's small kids, I'm sure they'll need a schedule. If it's high school students, another key skill, okay, how do I, build my own schedules? How can we as a team make sure that we get this done by the deadline? We have 1 week. How do we structure this so we can get it all done? So I think the teachers, they are needed there. So it's not just sort of scattered and random.
In our schools, we use the term project-based learning.
Yeah.
So there is a difference in this phenomenon-based learning and project-based learning?
That's been asked before. I think, I'm not sure about what the research says about this or the theoretical sort of authorities say about this. I'm not sure. The way I see, I think usually when we do this phenomenon-based things, there is some type of project involved. But then I don't know. I think there are a lot of projects that might actually fit into both categories. I'm sure you have some idea.
Yeah, I guess the starting point is different here. The starting point here is that curiosity is the starting point here. So there has to be one phenomenon, as he rightly said, that it's not a created one, but it's a real interesting phenomenon. Shall we go and check that part? So that's the starting point. For example, problem-based learning. Problem-based learning started with the medicine field. They started with the medicine field because there is a problem and symptoms and how to work on the symptoms so that we can solve the problem and which drugs will affect those kind of problems. Similarly, as he rightly said that there is within phenomenon-based learning, there can be multiple projects, one project or multiple projects, but the starting point is curiosity. That's the most interesting part. So currently, everything we are managing in most of the areas is through intellect. But here, the intellect is not the only thing that which achieves learning. Intellect is only one small part of the entire learning experience, but curiosity can be bigger part. This is the major objective for this phenomenon-based learning, and it was been identified by the Ministry of Education through many researchers to the university, and then because here in Finland we did comprehensive approach, because once one person goes to specific field, then he become a silo model of working over there, and then they don't look at the other things. And this was identified as need. That's why this has been produced. So that's a big difference between phenomenal-based learning and project-based learning. Am I right?
You must be right, but I'm not there.
Oh, okay. So we can ask more question then.
Maybe that's something we can think about later on as well. Okay, a couple of examples. This is what Steiner School has been doing on the basic education level. So the 4th, 5th, and 7th grade are my examples here. Kalevala is the Finnish national epic. So it's like Beowulf or or Nibelungenlied for the Germans and so on. So the way it's approached in the 4th grade, we have like basically 3, I guess. Well, drama is it's not a separate subject in Finland, but it is a big part of Finnish basically. But it's still I would say it's something else than most of the Finnish lessons. So you have Finnish music and drama, and the way they learn about Kalevala, it's not just sort of learning what it's about, getting the information, making those notes, understanding that, but it's they actually sort of they do this bit of a play where they actually act some scenes from that epic, and while they're doing that, they also they need to prepare music for that and learn about how the meter in Kalevala, how it goes, and what type of poetry, what they need to recite. In the 5th grade, you have Olympics. So they have an actual event, like Olympics. I think different Steiner schools from Finland all come together and they have these Olympics. So, but while they're doing that, they also learn about the history of Greece, where it all started, and physical education, of course, and also music. So it's like a big event, and leading up to that, all kinds of preparations and all kinds of sort of getting to know what the Olympics were about and what they could be about today. And then astronomy, which of course has to do with at least these 3 different subjects. So history, geography, and physics. So I guess this could be the way they're doing that. I wouldn't say they have a specific project for it, but it's more like while they are learning about astronomy and sort of doing research on that, they have to utilize all these 3. They need to understand sort of the people involved, the history of those people, biographies of those people, and then in addition to that, things like geography and physics.
So what will be the task given to them?
This I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's they sort of make this like a book, like a notebook based on maybe that's something you can ask tomorrow as well. I'm pretty sure that's I don't think there's an event involved or anything like that, but it's more like I think in this example, the way they do it, it's not that different. It's that the phenomenon-based idea is more like, I think they do it in a pretty traditional way, in the classroom, and teacher talks quite a lot and so on. But the idea is that in this case, it's more subjects all connect to that.
But somehow idea. At the end they have to present something.
Yes, I'm sure they do present something, and yes. I don't know specifically what. Okay, well, here's something that I was involved with myself. So this is from the upper secondary level. So from Steiner School, the high school there, we did this thing called economy in teams, and this is something that they do there every year, and they did this last autumn, and what I heard was that the last time they did this was the best so far. So I think they will have some good examples for you. So this has been, I think this is like the third or fourth time it's been done when they did this year. Yes, okay, so this period, there was economy was the phenomenon. So it's a big concept. It's not, I guess it's not very concrete, but it's still very much, you know, something that's present all the time. It affects everybody's life very much. So the way we did this, it was teamwork based. So this was something where we really wanted to, like I mentioned with the astronomy thing, you know, it's pretty traditional the way they're actually there in class. But with this one, we wanted to really like shake things up and, you know, try a whole different kind of schedule and just drop the role of, not drop the role of the teacher, but change the role of the teacher very much. So that the teacher doesn't stand in front of the class basically almost at all. Maybe a small like orientation lecture at the beginning of the week, but mostly just teamwork and you know, not a very strict sort of, or the teams had a very big freedom, you know, of how they wanted to do it and where they wanted to do it and when they wanted to do it. So we had we started out by doing Belton's Steamroll test, which is a test where you sort of answer these questions and then you get a result, like you're an organizer or you're a passive type of team player or you're an individual type of person and so on. You're a natural leader and you get this result. So all the students did that, and the idea was we wanted them to learn all these 5 different subjects. So Swedish, English, economics, mathematics, and oral skills. So 5 different, or oral skills is actually like a Finnish course, but still it's a different subject in this context. So we wanted them to learn all these 5 like specific things from all these 5 subjects. But in addition to that, we wanted them to learn those key skills. So the way we did this, we had a different sub-theme that was related to economy and different assignments for each week. And then each week, the different teams had a different leader, and that leader was in charge of that week's assignment. And yes, there was like an introductory lesson or a lecture, but then after that, they just had a total freedom to, you know, choose how they wanted to work. It's a couple of set events. And also at the end of the week, they had to present what they had sort of come up with and create it. There was some individual work each week because, like, for example, the Swedish course, they had to learn things like irregular verbs. And I guess we just couldn't come up with any way to, you know, of integrating that. Even though I think, you know, they could have, so maybe we could have made them use regular verbs in something they produced, but maybe we didn't. Maybe we just wanted them to still, you know, practice those in addition to that. So an example of an assignment this was the second week's assignment. So they had to create a live broadcast. And it was it's the year 2009. The economic crisis has begun to spread to Europe from the USA. Plan and present a live news broadcast taking place in 2009 in a specific country. And each team was assigned a different country. And you know, this could be like a small assignment inside some lesson or class, but we wanted to do this like in a big way. So instead of sort of teaching them about the economic crisis and then they had to do something with that, they had to learn and do that research by themselves. And the way we organized it, we sort of gave them a specific set of instructions, what they have to include in that in that live broadcast. So general information about that specific country that they got, or they were assigned, how the situation in the US has changed their country's economy, unemployment, and we had, this is just like a part or like a brief version of the instruction, but we had all these like several smaller things that we wanted them to do, like a diagram of unemployment. So we had those general instructions and general goals, but also very specific things. Like you need to have a diagram on this, or like you need to use these and these grammatical things like irregular verbs or prepositions or types of relative clauses or whatever. When we wanted to integrate those foreign languages there. And also mathematics, of course, they needed maths to be able to produce those things we wanted them to do. To build those diagrams, to make those calculations, they needed to use maths. And specific, I'm not a math teacher, so I don't know what that was about, but specific types of maths as well. Yes. And then, they needed to include a Finnish language expert interview. This was a bit of a fun, like a bit of a drama thing as well. But since it was an oral skills, they need to learn presentation and oral skills as well. So we wanted to include this kind of segment. And of course, the broadcast itself. It was also instructed that they need to really, learn about presenting information. So, a big pile of different kinds of things that they needed to take into consideration if they wanted to do this well. So the idea was that to do this well, they really needed to, delve pretty deep into all kinds of things. Of course, not every group, some of them did better than the others, and that's, I guess, only natural. Yes, the last one was a bit of a okay, we need something in Swedish. That's happened to, sometimes in the news you'll have that bit of a lighter segment at the end, so it was a sightseeing. I'm pretty sure they had instructions in that too, like what they need to include, what types of vocabulary, what kinds of grammatical structures and so on. Yes. And at the end of the week, they presented those, and then feedback and so on.
Feedback among all of them, they all peer reviewed.
Yeah, it was a peer review. Yeah. And usually somebody asks at this point, how are they evaluated?
How are they evaluated?
Yeah.
Well, that was
because it's hard to give a grade on, I guess, even though we have, of course, we have a very specific set of instructions. So I think there is, you can evaluate how deep they went, about, in these economics concepts. Did they use them correctly? The foreign language sections, how did they do in that? But as I recall, I don't think they got a grade. You should ask about that tomorrow as well. They might have even changed it, but I don't think they gave a grade. I think it was more of a general feedback and a verbal feedback.
Is this high school age?
Yes. Okay, and then 5th weeks, that was the last week though. It was 5 weeks this time we did this. I'm pretty sure it's a bit shorter now, but it was 5 weeks the first few times. So the last assignment was to design a game about taxes, and they had to include the following themes, and this is also just a couple of things I picked from the instruction. So it was more structured and bigger set of instructions originally. But things like public economy, municipal income, expenditure, the gray market, its effects on society, the flat tax, and then the Finnish system of progressive taxes, that they need to understand. So they have to design that. And the idea, I guess, was that they designing a game is in itself, I would say, a pretty inspiring and I guess a fun assignment to do, but to do a really good game on taxation, they would need to really understand those concepts. The first time we did this, I think a lot of the groups sort of came up with this monopoly type of, and sort of like a Trivial Pursuit, like a question and an answer. I think a better idea could have been sort of somehow make them do the type of game where there's not just like you roll the dice and then you get a question and then you answer. Something that will require more like a difficult, more difficult, way of using those terms and concepts. But like this is something that I think I don't have a lot of the things I've done or tried. There's something that I think have been very interesting to try out, but there's always something to sort of do better next time, and that. I think I think this is something that's definitely worth giving a shot and trying out, but then you have to be very critical as well. Like the time spent, did we achieve those results? How could we do this better? But I think this I think it was a fun assignment as well. And they had to give a sales pitch in English, so that was something that they had to use language again in a specifically instructed manner. Giving a sales pitch is a very specific type of verbal or oral communication, so they had to learn about that too. And yes. Okay, so now I guess I do have a couple of other examples, but maybe at this point I could show you some of the criticism and discussion that has been going on. It's only 2016 that the new curriculum sort of came out, and I think this is a new thing for everybody, and there's a lot of discussion now in Finland about are these new things that people are doing in education, are they worth it? Are they just some new sort of trend, or should we just get back to the traditional type of doing things? And what about technology? Is there too much of that? There's all these questions. So I think these are all important questions. Some of them have to do with the students and what they gain from this, and some of them have to do with the organizational side of it. So leadership, planning, collaboration. It requires an extra effort, at least when you're starting this out. But on the other hand, I think those times I was involved, I think we also sort of learn from each other quite a lot. So now in the school where I'm working now, it's a bigger school, and I feel like every teacher is sort of by themselves quite a lot, and we're doing our own. We have our own little field. Okay, this is where I'm working, and this is what I'm doing. There's not a lot of that sort of collaboration or planning together. Steiner School is such a small school, so I learned a lot, working with the psychology teacher and the arts teacher, and I think it's a good way to sort of also learn about yourself as a teacher and sort of widen your horizons when you do these kinds of things. So that was definitely a plus for me, and especially if you don't try to do too much right away. If you just pick like this year we're gonna try out something, we're gonna do something like do 2 weeks, and these subjects, this type of phenomenon, we're gonna try it out. So I think that's where you need to start. As science school, I was sort of involved in building this new type of structure for the school year, and I think maybe we got quite excited about this. And at first we tried to we need to have every period going to have a theme or a phenomenon. Everything is going to revolve around that, and it was like a bit of a megalomaniac, everything needed to have its own place, and there needed to be a phenomenon all the time. I think with those experiences now, I would sort of kind of get back on that. I think they have done that. So it's like quality over quantity, and choose those right places for this kind of approach. Yeah. But I don't think this is in contrast to deep learning and facts. This is a common criticism that you see. It's been in the papers last autumn especially, that they don't need to learn anything. They just do all these fun all these crafts and just play around, and they don't need to really learn anything. So I wouldn't say, I don't think that's the goal at all. I think the goal is to learn, and even learn in a more sort of holistic manner, I think, because they need to create something. They need to create something that could be used in the actual world. So I think that could be deeper learning than just sort of learn so you can do well in that exam, and then maybe forget about it. So because they're not just there, with their heads and their academic sort of side. Yeah, but I think it's a matter of organizing the way you instruct them. Will it lead to actual deep learning, or will it lead to something superficial, just the product or the result? But I think this criticism is something you can give to the traditional approach as well. If I'm a teacher, I have 35 students. Most of the talking is done by me. Like 10 or 15 of my students they might not be on their phones, but maybe they're mentally in some other place. So that's not deep learning either. And actually, one of the feedback that we got from our students was that they were a bit disappointed. I had to actually do something. Like some of those students, who preferred to just sit there and maybe think about something else. With this approach, that's just not possible, because their team is gonna get angry at them if they try to just not do anything. So I think activating and really making everybody do something, I think that's a big opportunity here. Of course, some of the students, they said that they prefer to listen, and they like when the teacher talks a lot, and that's how they learn. And of course, some of the students are like that. So I think that's why we should offer different things for everybody. Yes. And I think time spent, results gained. It's also a matter of sort of planning, not doing too much, doing something and really planning it so that they will, really need to delve deep into those things. But the criticism you see, something I noticed, I read somebody had written on the biggest newspaper in Finland, Helsingin Sanomat. Somebody had written an angry, when people write on the paper, right? What's it in English? When you have
an editorial, their opinion.
Yeah, their opinion. Yeah. And there was a couple of these last autumn, a big criticism, okay, today's, they just use their computers and they do all kinds of funny things and they don't really learn, and the teacher doesn't teach and so on. So I think there's a lot of different kinds of new things that when you see that criticism, I think there's a lot of different things that people, like sort of get mixed up as well. Because I think the three of these, the shift towards a different type of role of the teachers and technology, and then these learning environments where you might not have a desk, you might just have like a little couch or something where you just sort of like maybe groups of pillows and so on. So I think there's a lot of things that people have been trying out in different schools now, and then the people who criticize this, they think it's all the same. They think it's all just, playing around instead of learning. So I think there was a specific criticism on phenomenon-based learning where they actually criticized using too much technology, for example. So much going on, so many new things that I feel like it's not that clear cut. I mean, there is a place for criticism, but sometimes it feels like some people will just be opposed to all kinds of new ideas. And there are many ways of implementing this. So I do understand if you spend like 3 weeks just making something out of cardboard and playing around and so on. That is, I guess, time that could be spent better.
So do they have to do everything in school only? Are
Well,
you giving homeworks to the students?
There are homeworks.
Yeah.
But like, I guess in this case, you can tell the kind of homework.
Well, in this case, they didn't have, when we had our economy and teams thing, they
No, other than this, do you give homeworks?
yes, we do give homework, but I maybe, well, that's also, something that's discussed quite a lot. I know some teachers think that, we shouldn't give out any homework, that it's, would be better for the students, do all their work at school and then just have more free time and relax and do sports and so on. In some schools, like in my current school, we do give quite a lot of, I guess, homework compared to some other places. So I think there's variation. I don't know, compared to other countries, maybe you can.
Yeah, so as far as the homework is concerned, that's one myth which is spread across the globe, that Finland's Finnish schools don't give homeworks. So that's a myth. So the school do give homeworks, but also the objective of homework is not to repeat everything, whatever has happened in the classroom. It's nowhere. So it's a specific target with the objective, because you have to challenge the students that why should they go back and do their homework. It's that so the case. Because in my son's school, they have to convince the students that why should they do that homework, not only just because they are afraid of maybe notifying in the help that okay, your student did not do the homework. That's not the objective. They have to motivate them to do the homework, and that's the objective of a teacher, that he should be able to create a culture of, for example, homework. One of them were having very interesting homework where they learned about the simple environmental sciences, and the objective was to go to the nearest forest to you and take down all the leaves and colors of that, and come back on the next 3 days back after 3 days. That was the homework. So it was very much engaging, fun, interesting. Yes. But there were also kind of homework where you have to do the math.
Yeah.
Which is also, then you have to sit down and complete the math. Or
I guess with maths you need to the repetition.
Repetition is required then actually. So, yes.
Yeah. Yes, and well, the last bullet there, the decline in the PISA results. There has been some decline, I guess, in the recent years compared to the 2000 millennium. Some people, they want to know why this has been happening, and I've also found that some people sort of try to blame it on technology and blame it on these sort of new things that have been going on. But I think it's it's a difficult question to answer. I'm sure there are many kinds of, reasons for this. And even today, we're doing pretty well, though, and so it's not like a dramatic decline, but yeah. And just a few points. This is something that I've been thinking about recently. Previously, I just spoke about these, I guess, usually projects and these sort of bigger things that we have been doing. But then something I've been thinking about just recently, just this year, I guess, is this phenomenon-based like thinking from the point of view of the teacher. So maybe not connecting the subjects, not constructing a different kind of period, but just an approach. So this is purely just my sort of idea, I guess. So on the left-hand side, I have the way I myself used to think, like what my subject is about. How can I get the best results so my students do well? But then, what I feel like maybe I should think about more is like what the world is like and what's happening out there in the real world, instead of just from the point of view of, what is my subject, how will they be evaluated in that, how will they do well. So again, I'm not really sure, because I'm not a person of, research. I'm not sure what the theoretical sort of categories, how they would sort of, mix with this, but I feel like this is kind of a, phenomenon-based way of thinking about teaching, I guess. And then on the left-hand side as well, I have the following guidelines set by textbooks, evaluating through exams, staying in the classroom, and then on the right-hand side, this sort of new way of thinking. I'm going to follow my own expertise as a teacher and my own interest in the world when I plan, for my lessons and for my assignments and my topics. I'm still going to do all the things I'm required by the curriculum, but trying to shift it more towards something that would feel like meaningful for the students. So I find I'm quite often I've had trouble sort of explaining why something is important. So I think that, I guess we all know what that feels like. Yes, but evaluating through various means. And evaluation is also a topic of much discussion in Finland. The new curriculum is sort of trying to make people, use formative evaluation instead of just, doing that final exam and just measuring the exact skills, but we should evaluate, the progress and how they have worked. And in the upper secondary level, we have a lot of freedom to do this. We don't have that rubric where we have to evaluate them in a specific way and then give a specific number. I guess in the lower levels, they don't have that much freedom. But there are these teachers in Finland that are totally like anarchist when it comes to handing out the grades. I usually mention Pekka Peura. Maybe you've heard of him. I think he works in Vantaa, Espoo. He's an upper secondary level maths teacher, and he's got this sort of he's developed this approach of sort of individualized or like a flipped learning type of thing that he does. He doesn't teach anything in front of the classroom, and the way he hands out the grades, he just kind of lets them decide their own grades. They'll just like, okay, I get a 9, and then he'll ask, okay, why do you think you should get a 9? And then they'll say something, and he'll be like, okay. So
you have to convince the teacher.
Well, I think yes, I think they do have to convince the teacher, but he did mention that even if he does disagree, he will say that he disagrees, but he might even let them still, pick that. He doesn't have any tests. I think the amount of work that they get done is the basis for the grade in some cases. I'm not sure.
So do you give end of year report to the students of every class? End of year assessment report kind of thing?
Well, in the high school level, we actually just at the end of each course. So in my case now we have 5 periods. So at the end of each period, they will get.
What about primaries?
Yes, they do get a report at the end of the year, and then depending on the school, they might get one in December. That's not like in the law, I think. I think that that's.
The school can decide, yeah?
Yeah,
Yes,
the school can decide.
Normally from grade 1 to 4 or 3, in fact, there is no number grades.
Yeah.
No,
There are the verbal grades, or there are the words.
Yes.
Like, okay,
The
you're really
rubrics
good.
are there, general
Yes, so
comments.
rubrics are there. Yes.
Rubrics are there.
Like general means very general, 3
So,
lines.
3 lines.
There are no any 60
I
something
think good teamwork.
points that you have to write.
That's one thing. So teamwork good, maybe could be improved or excellent. These are the 3 things like that.
The mandatory report is once a year at the end.
Yes.
Like that is
From grade 4.
from grade 4.
There are schools which still do not have grades or the final scores numbers even at grade 4. Schools have a little bit of freedom to decide, but generally grade 4, they start.
Some schools have been sort of moving away from these like grades, or they've been like giving them out later than before. I know Steiner School only gives grades at the 8th grade. Before that, it's just like a verbal or like a written assignment, evaluation, assessment. So, but at the 9th grade, at the end of the 9th grade, everyone in Finland gets their grades.
There's